is an entrepreneur I met when I was a fledgling venture capitalist in the late 90s. And he was starting a social network at the time. He didn't quite say that that's what it was. He was a little too early, I'd say. But I had run into him several times since, and he was always doing something entrepreneurial. And this last project that he's been working on intrigued me because that's essentially what I do every day. Is I sit down with entrepreneurs and hear their pitch, and I felt that there's certainly a need to talk about that pitch more. Not just in trying to raise money, but a pitch is, and David, I'm sure we'll get into it, is much more than just trying to raise money. It's what you tell. It's what you tell your employees. It's what you tell. How you recruit. It's how you tell tell your customers. It's all those things, and it's not just a pitch for money, which always gets the heat. And Dave wrote a book, and I said, that's awesome, and more entrepreneurs need to hear that story on how to go about doing this. And as entrepreneurialism is not is certainly a learned skill from my perspective. It's something that you can pick up over time if you're dedicated, just like any other profession. And Dave's made entrepreneurialism his profession, and I'm looking forward to hearing more tonight. So thanks, David.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks. I also want to introduce my partner, Jen Hauser, and we'll go through our bios. But I needed MIT representation. So Jen is an MIT Sloan grad, and I went to a lesser school across the river, so I needed to have the real McCoy here. I'd love to make this interactive. I think it'll make it more fun and interesting for everyone. So please feel free to interrupt, ask questions, make comments. If we have enough interest, we'll run some exercises later. So please get involved. This is what we're thinking of running through tonight. So we'll talk about who you all are, and we've met, fortunately had some time to talk to a lot of you and learn what you're working on, and we'll tell you about where we're coming from, and then we're going to talk about what a business plan is and how you create a business plan and how to pitch. Just, even though we talked to a couple of you, would love to get a quick read on, how many of you are planning a venture now? Excellent.
Fantastic.
And then how many of you are planning to plan a venture? Okay.
Me too.
All right. And of those of you who are planning, how many of you are doing it to raise capital? Okay, great. I like to see that there's people who are planning and not raising capital. We'll get into that a little bit later. And I guess question really is there anything in particular that you'd like to get out of this, given what I told you about the topics? Do you care more about how to write a plan versus how to pitch, or any derivation of those things? Yeah.
I'll throw one out.
Great. Thanks.
The business plan serves at least two purposes. One is to keep you on track, and the other one, of course, is to be your calling card to get the entree to speak to somebody to raise funds. Do you have to cater the business plan to every person that you want to raise money from, or do you basically try to do one generic one that grabs everybody?
There's probably more nuances in terms of the way that you pitch than the way that you plan. I'd say there's more flavors of planning driven by what your intention is. Like if you were pitching to, if you're writing the plan for something that's internal, if you're bootstrapping, you may not go as deep in certain areas, and you may go deeper in other areas. So there are lots of variations. But of course, you want to tailor your pitch to your audience, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later, understanding who you're pitching to and what they what their areas of expertise are. And in terms of raising capital, my view has always been, getting in front of the right person makes a huge difference. Yep.
Yeah, along those lines, I'd be interested in learning about any innovative ways you would have to present your plan to different people. In other words, apart from the traditional banks or VC people, how do you get your plan in front of people and identify those people or agencies that might be interested in funding a new venture who you might not come to top of mind?
I'm making a note here to cover that when we get to pitching. Great. One more?
The differences in pitching to potential investors or other companies which may already be somewhat involved in that business, you feel you may be bringing a added benefit to your idea?
Like a corporate investor?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Great. Well, let's get started. All right, we'll do kind of quick backgrounds. So as I mentioned, I'm HBS grad, sorry, and got out of school and helped a couple of other entrepreneurs build some ventures. I helped start up Polo Jeans as their first employee and got a taste of what it was like to start something. And then started what's now called a social network in 1996. That's about the time I met Steve. And just before that, I remember I wrote my first business plan with actually a former business partner who's a Sloan grad too. And it was about, we'll get into what a business plan is, but it was about, I think, 60 pages long, spiral bound with beautiful exhibits, and it felt like an A. I learned the hard way. Nobody ever read it. By the time we finished writing it, which took us forever, we were on to the next idea. It was useless in pitching, and I subsequently ended up working in between. I've started. This is my third venture, and the first one was a social network. Second one was an ad network, and in between those ventures, I ended up doing consulting and coaching to a lot of entrepreneurs. First, a lot of high-profile celebrities, Moby and Tiki Barber and Mark Gordon, who's a producer of Grey's Anatomy, and then I started coaching, everyday startups, a little bit more, and just loved working with founders and helping them tackle very kind of pragmatic problems. And met with Jen, and we actually did a consulting project together and realized that we shared that passion and wanted to make a business out of it. And we'll tell you about Upstart Bootcamp in a second, but we've coached over 100 founders at this point. So we've gotten into the trenches and seen a lot of founders kind of learn about what it takes and how to help founders move through the stages of development. I write columns for Inc. magazine and for Forbes and soon for Business Insider and Open Forum. And we wrote this book called Hit the Deck, which is kind of the how this whole thing came about. And I'll let Jen take it from here. Yeah.
So I'm Jen, and I'm a Sloan grad from out of the first entrepreneurship program that MIT did at Sloan, graduated in '99. Like David, I am a serial entrepreneur, and this is my my fifth venture, and all of them have been high-tech, internet, mobile related. My last business was was a video sharing company called MotionBox that was purchased. We sold it to HP last year, and all along the way, I've just always been so interested in talking to other founders, and whether it's over a drink, whether it's on a ski lift, wherever, and it's so interesting to see. One of the things I realized was that people who are starting companies, most of them are doing it for the first time. You face so many things that you have never faced before, and you're all facing the same things. And so I realized after a little while, after my second company, after my third company, that I'd be sitting on a ski lift with someone and they'd say, oh, I'm going into pitch. And I'd say, oh, they're going to ask you these 3 questions. And afterwards they'd say, oh my God, Jen, they asked me those 3 questions. And so that's part of what we're doing with Upstart, is to collect all of this information and to distill it down and say, hey, here's the order that you do things in, here are the common questions that you're going to get, and to really make it as simple and easy as possible so you can focus on building your business.
Why don't you explain while you're going, what
right.
Upstart Bootcamp is?
Right. No, and so we started. Both of us were working with founders and informally before we started Upstart Bootcamp, and we came together and we decided to start by coaching founders and working one-on-one with them. And it's something that's near and dear to our hearts, and it helps us take those common situations that you are facing and turn it into things like on-demand online courses. So we've got a course live that's very similar to the topic that's covered in the book about how to create your business plan quickly, easily. Here's exactly what you need to do. Here's templates, here's examples. The course is live on Udemy, which is a learning platform. We write books. We do webinars. We've got a webinar coming up. We'll cover that at the end next week. Mm-hmm. Next week on Financing 101. We've got newsletter. We've got partnerships with big companies that deal with entrepreneurs every day, like Inc. Magazine. Am I missing anything?
Newsletter, yeah. We see the newsletter.
Yeah, the newsletter. Yeah, no, I got it. And so, anyway, that's what we're all about. And so, let's just jump into the topic.
Great. All right. So, what is a business plan? It's kind of a funny question, but we found that there's a lot of confusion about what a business plan is, what it should be, what it's used for, and we wanted to try to clarify that. So, to us, a business plan is really about thinking through an idea, making sure you've thought through all the angles. It's that process, more so than a product in particular. And it's also about being prepared to share that idea. And that could be to pitch to investors, but it could also be to get partners or spouses or employees on the same page as you. So it's not just about raising capital.
I think another important thing that's not on our list here is that it's something that you are constantly doing. You're constantly evolving your idea, and it's a process that you're going through where you're testing what's working, what isn't working, make an adjustment, or we're not going to make an adjustment for that. And so a lot of people think about it as this static document that you do once and you pitch to an investor and that's it. And we're talking about something that's you use and you think about and it evolves.
Yep. So I already talked to you about the overload, what we call it, term paper style plan. It takes too long to write. You can't get anyone to read it. I coach founders who say it's all in there and they plunk it down on the table and they want to pay me to read it, and I won't. I want to hear them tell me, it's useless in a pitch. There's better things to do with your time than to write a long document. The flip side is it's very cool these days to say, who needs a business plan? Look at Facebook, they started without a business plan. What better proof do you need? We just need a back of a napkin. And there's some truth to that, and there are some arguments I think that make a lot of sense about not going overboard trying to predict what's impossible to predict. And it also depends on your risk profile. If you're in college and you're a hacker and you want to build something and see if you can get people to use it, and in many cases you don't necessarily have to go through the whole process. But what we found is it's really important to strike a balance. For most entrepreneurs, what you want to do is plan just enough so that you're making smart choices without wasting valuable time, and avoiding huge mistakes. I coached a founder recently who had a website and a newsletter, and I asked her a couple quick questions, and what's your business model and how do you attract customers and what does it cost you to attract them and how valuable are they? And it was like she hadn't really thought through what she wanted to be and whether there were advertisers out there who would actually be interested, and whether she was trying to drive people to a website or have them read a newsletter. And so going through the exercise of thinking through all the angles of your business is very important, can really help you avoid mistakes and make smart choices. We believe in doing it quickly, so we're talking weeks, not months.
And I think when we sat down to do our business plan, I mean, we had a draft by the end of the week. It took us a week of sitting down and going through each topic and sort of duking it out about, I think this, and then, I mean, the next week we had it all, we had a pitch deck pulled together, but it's something we've now, since then, spent our time testing the assumptions and the things that we laid out in that plan. Is that working? Oh, we need to tweak that. No, let's change this. And it's something that is living and breathing to us, but it happened very quickly at the beginning.
And there's certain times that, and we'll walk through that in a minute, where it makes more sense than at other times to go back to the plan.
Can you ask a question as you speak?
Please.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, you use the term testing. The question I have relates to writing the business plan and in parallel, basically working on what I would say almost how to implement the plan. And going back and forth. When you use the word testing, what did you mean by that?
Sure. Well, I think the way I probably should have qualified what I was saying is, Dave and I we had been coaching and working with founders for a number of years before this, so we already had a pretty good sense of what would work and what wouldn't work. So we had done a lot of that testing informally, and I think that by testing, what I mean is we said, okay, this is how we think we're going to market to founders, and this is where we're going to find them and what they're going to react to, what price points they're going to react to. And so we quickly pulled together some products and started putting them out there to test. Were people actually interested in paying, $125 for an online course? And that's something that we want to do as quickly as possible, put it in front of someone real and see if they react to it, and then evolve our plan based on what's working.
Yep.
Can you, so people aren't going to read this 60-page document. Can you just give us like the 3 reasons why they're not going to read that 60-page document?
Yeah, ADD. And you ask someone like Steve how many people pitch to him. Yeah.
Is it simply time? Is that the issue, or is there something that's not in there that should be?
Well, there's a couple things. I think from an entrepreneur's perspective, you're trying to get someone's attention. If you are raising capital, let's say, you're trying to get someone's attention who's Steve's back there managing his portfolio companies right now, probably, right? I mean, he's a busy guy. He sits on boards and he's flying around, and all right. And so you're trying to get someone to pay attention to something. You don't want to make them have to read through this long document. They're just not going to do it, probably. Maybe later in the process if they need to check a box, but certainly not at the beginning when you're pitching and trying to get your initial ideas across.
I think another reason is that your plan is extremely important, but your team and your idea is extremely important, and that is what people invest in a lot. And so the ability to say something very concisely, here's our plan today, we know it's going to change, here's how we're thinking about testing and evolving it over time, and they need to get a sense of you as a team as well, and that's a very important part of the investment that they're doing, and that is something that I've never seen done well, no matter how thick the document is. It needs to be a person standing in front of you, connecting with you and saying, here's my experience, my philosophy, and how I'm going to do this for you.
I never send plans. I mean, unless if you're applying to something and there's some rules that you have to, but I encourage entrepreneurs not to send their plan in ahead of time, but to pitch it in person. So we'll go through the actually right here, the materials that we usually suggest people do. You have an elevator pitch so that you can say, hey, Steve, I'm working on this cool thing. What do you think? Does it sound interesting? And if there's a little interest, great. Can I send you a one-pager? PDF so that you can ensure that it looks the way that you want it to look, and it's not something that's, if there is any kind of secret sauce, which I'm not a big believer in anyway, but you're emailing it out there, and it doesn't have to include everything. It's really a teaser to get a meeting. And then you go in and you pitch in person. And another reason to pitch in person, so it's much more persuasive, but it's very common to have pushback, to have people not understand certain topics. And if you're not there to defend it and explain it and watch their body language and have a discussion, which really the real magic of a pitch is about a discussion. It's interactive. It's not you putting something in front of someone and having them just lean back and read it. So the materials are an elevator pitch and a one-pager, and then a pitch deck that we'll go through what that includes, and then financial projections, which you can start out with some very simple ones and get more complex as your business progresses. And if you're not raising capital, you may get by with some very back-of-the-envelope numbers. If you're trying to go raise a $1 million round, you're probably going to have to dig in a lot more.
And unfortunately, I'm probably a few months too late on this, so I have a thesis. Does it matter how sophisticated a company is? Does a more sophisticated, more complex company demand more data backing up and justifying the investment? Or is it just forget about it no matter who you are and what you're doing? Make it short, sweet, get the meeting and let them ask the questions and answer when you're there.
I think if you've done it, it's fine. It is what it is. And you're probably it'll probably be easy for you to take that and crystallize it into a pitch deck. But we found that there is a format, and actually, we wrote a whole book on it and built a business around it, that there are certain topics that every business plan should contain. And I think in our experience, most businesses, even if they're complex, you can convey the essence of them in a pitch deck.
Well, at least in my case, it wasn't really conveying the essence as much as justifying the numbers. And there's just tons of research because it's a worldwide product. Should that all be just left out, cut out, and again, bring it down to the basics?
We'll get into this a little bit more, but very often you really need in this world that's with rampant ADD, you got to get people's attention and you got to explain it. Give them the headlines, make sure they get that, and it's great if you have tons of data behind it. And if you are pitching to a venture capitalist, you probably will get into due diligence, and that's where you may have time to really engage and have them go through your model and challenge your assumptions. But usually it happens later in the process. So it's good that you've done that. Yep.
Should the go-to-market section be part of the first pages?
It's probably not as essential in a one-pager as really what you want to do is get them excited. You want to give them the essence of the idea and give them the sense that you've got a team that can execute it, but you don't necessarily have to get into the details. It's something that's probably better done in person. I'm going to keep moving because I just want to stay on track here. The pitch deck. The pitch deck is something that should be in the neighborhood of, let's say 12 to 15 slides. We have 15 topics. Sometimes you can combine those topics into different onto the same slides, and some of the topics are things that you want to think about but not necessarily put in your deck. You want to keep it simple, give them the headlines, let them ask for the details, let it come out in the discussion. You should be able to pitch usually in 20 minutes or less. And of course, there's going to be discussion and interruptions, and it'll get longer, but you should use that as a target. And as we said, the magic is the discussion. It's a two-way conversation or multi-way conversation. All right, so how do you do this? So this is a roadmap of a typical startup, right? And they're all different, but to the extent that you can make a formula out of it, companies tend to start with an idea, which really is a hypothesis that, as we've said, you need to go and you need to think it through, and there are certain parts of it that you're going to have to go out and test and tighten and tweak and adjust. And so you start out, and a plan is a great way to help you think through that idea to make sure that you haven't missed anything, and then you've covered all the angles. And then you may or may not have had a team before that, so but certainly you're going to need to make sure that everyone who's involved is on the same page. You're all gunning for the same thing, and you understand what the variables are that you are testing, and what your objectives are, and those things. And then often you need some resources to start. Now that could be bootstrapping, it could be savings, it could be could be raising capital. But you need to know what those resources are. And you also, if you need to get them from outside, a plan is a great way to, the best way to convince other people to be involved. The next step, it tends to be if you follow the lean startup approach, is to take a core customer, the low-hanging fruit, the early adopter who's really going to be jumping up and down about your product, and build just the bare minimum product with the bare minimum amount of features that will satisfy what you think is their need. Jason,
see if it does.
Yeah. Jason Fried wrote a book called Rework, and he has a great metaphor of a hot dog stand. And he says, if you want to be in the hot dog business or have a hot dog stand, you don't necessarily need great relish or great buns or great signage, but you better have a damn good hot dog. So your MVP, your minimum viable product, is your hot dog, and you want to build that and get it out there quickly, because until you get that product in front of customers, you're flying blind. I have on my business card here, your mom is not a valid test market, and I think I refer to that later. But we meet people every day who say, I have a great idea. Well, how do you know it's great? My friends think it's great. Well, terrific. Let's get in front of customers and see what they think.
How important is it in your plan to indicate that you're putting some of your own money into this venture?
Well, I think that's more of a question about the process of raising capital, and I think most investors want to see that you have skin in the game, that you're committed, and that can take a lot of forms, right? That can be opportunity cost. If you've got the capital and you're not putting it in, that's a red flag. If you don't have the capital but you're putting in lots of sweat equity and putting your reputation and your time on the line, that's another form of commitment. So as you move through the next couple phases, once you put that minimum viable product in front of that early adopter customer, most of us get it wrong. Not the whole thing, but there's certain things you may get the features wrong. You may get the pricing wrong, the way you message it. And I talked to a coaching client today who was ready to pitch it in. He's had a product out in market for 4 months, and it just wasn't selling. And he said, should I just bag this? And I said, well, wait a minute. You got to break this down and understand, that there's a whole bunch of different variables here, and you've got to isolate those variables and figure out what's not working and why, and be able to measure it and fix them one by one. So that's called pivoting, is to make some tweaking, kind of strategic and tactical changes without necessarily throwing the whole thing out, because very often you'll get some things right and some things wrong. And that's where you tweak your plan. That's what, as Jen was saying, we've done that in our own business with Upstart, where we think, all right, a course should look like this and work like this, and we get it out there in front of customers, and they say, no, we want it to be a different experience. So we went and built it a different way. The first time I started a company, I was very concerned with confidentiality, and I think you see that as people do more and more ventures, that they're more likely to say, "Here's my idea." An idea. Most ideas by themselves are not really valuable. It's about execution. And I saw a stat recently, 66% of Inc. 500 CEOs said they didn't end up following their initial plan. They followed, they came up with a plan B or A prime. And so, your initial idea is probably not as sacred as many people, as some people think. I'm a fan of getting it out there.
I mean, another thing about getting it out there is that I found you get way more back from the person that you're talking to than they are likely to take your idea and actually be able to execute on it. So every time you tell someone your idea, it should be immediately followed by, and here's what I need next. I need an introduction to this venture capitalist, or I need to find the greatest chief marketing officer, or I need, and you'll be surprised what people give you back. I mean, entrepreneurs, everyone, they are the most generous bunch of people that are out there. Everyone wants to help you, and unless you tell them this is what I need, they won't know what to do with it. Yep. So it's a valuable way to get what you need.
So the next step is really to prove that you have a way to attract customers that's cost effective and scalable, that you can repeat it, and then finally to expand once you find that formula, and that's a great time to raise capital. Once you've nailed the formula and you can say, I can buy customers for this price, and they're worth 5 times as much during the lifetime of our relationship, and I can acquire them in this way. If I have X dollars, I can get Y customers. That's the best time to raise money. Okay. All right. So one thing that's very important in terms of writing a plan is to wear 2 hats, right? You don't want to drink the Kool-Aid and fall in love with your idea until you've thought about it objectively. So we have kind of the Warren Buffett investor hat. You've put that on yourself. You are actually making more of an investment in your startup than anyone else. So make sure that you believe in it and be objective and don't fall in love with it. Then, once you're convinced that, that you believe in it, then you can put on your sales hat and go pitch it. In terms of pitch style, it's not about the words on a deck. Don't go bananas with your, making your deck super complicated. It should be simple. It's really about the words that you're speaking when you're giving your pitch, more so than the stuff on a slide. The slide's a discussion guide. So we just kind of quick question poll here. So what goes in a plan? What are the topics that a plan should cover? You can just shout them out. You don't have to raise your hand.
Market, competition.
Market. What about the market?
All about your customers. What are their demands? What do they have now? What are their problems?
Barriers to entry.
Competition.
Product description, maybe, I don't know.
I'll call it offering. Okay?
Management, current is what you need.
Team.
Financials.
Yep.
Did someone say P&L?
Yeah, projections.
Technology.
I'll include technology and offering.
Oh, okay.
Anything else?
Barriers to entry.
Got it.
Competitive differentiation.
Yep. Let's call it. We'll lump it under kind of strategy. We're going to go through a little exercise in 2 minutes about strategy. All right, that's a great start.
Just executive summaries.
Yep. So, here are the 15 topics that we think a plan needs to cover. You want to jump in?
You want to talk about how we came up with the 15
Yeah, go ahead.
So this list is, when we were writing the book, and when David was writing the book, he reached out to over 100 leading professional investors, entrepreneurs, and said, okay, you tell us what goes into a plan like this, and based on what you're seeing and what is the most effective way to communicate your idea. And this is the list that came back. It's also the list that I personally have been grilled on 3 times in going through the funnel, the pitch process, and I can tell you that this is, sort of the minimum entry. And like David said, depending on your business, there may be some things here that you can combine with each other, or is really for you internally as a team. But we're going to walk through each one of them. So it's real world, what's actually investors are looking for, and that help you attract the right people to your idea.
Great. So goals. Goals is one of these slides that you don't see in every business plan, and you may or may not want to share it depending on who you're pitching to. If you're pitching to a very specific type of investor, and it's very clear they invest in this certain thing, and they're looking for a $1 billion exit, you may not have to specify that, but that's not always the case, and so there are a couple things to think about in terms of goals. How big is this thing that you envision? And that's not projections. It's when I'm dreaming up my company, my vision for the company. Is it the next Microsoft, or is it, 3 people running a law practice? They're very different, and it's important that everyone involved agrees on what you're at least shooting for. How are you going to pull money out of this thing? How are people going to turn equity into return? And that could be from dividends. It could be by selling the company, by taking it public. And soft goals, are there things that you want to accomplish? We want to be the leader in our space. We want to, be recognized.
I know I was talking to someone beforehand about one of my soft goals is I personally like working in a really small environment, so I'm not interested in working in a company that gets to be more than 30, 40, 50 people. I mean, that just isn't the right fit for me personally, so it's a goal in what I'm deciding to do next that it meet that for me.
Really?
Yeah. Really.
I'm just kidding.
I can deal with one.
Environment. Okay, this is one thing. In 1996, I started a social network based on alumni affiliations, beginning with Harvard. Ouch. And I learned that lesson pretty well. I won't forget it. But you got to make sure that it's the right time for your idea. And being too early is almost no better than being wrong. So make sure it's the right time and place. Make sure that the market's big enough to support your goals. If you're trying to build a $1 billion business in a $1 billion market, you got some tough road to hoe. And also understand what's going on in the market. You should understand the market better than, let's say, people that you're pitching to. You really have to understand what's driving the growth and the changes in the market.
And one of my businesses was a mobile concierge business, which was really based on the assumption that phones at that point, which was 99, were dumb. You couldn't even store 20 numbers in them. But how long was that actually going to last that a cell phone was dumb? So that's something that we really needed to understand and think about, because clearly that was a problem that was going to be solved, and we needed to factor into the growth of that business.
Okay, customers. So you want to make sure that you're not trying to be all things to all people, and you're going to have to prioritize. That, by the way, is another reason why I don't believe in the 40-page plan, because with a pitch deck, you've got to prioritize. You got to make choices and pick just the top couple of things that you want to talk about, and that's how a startup works too. You're not going to be able to, if you have a 20-page marketing plan, you're not going to be able to do the 20 different things. You're just not. So you're going to have to prioritize.
Well, and it's, I think, a very good entrepreneur knows how to say no. It's really hard to say no, but you're constantly going to be faced with too many opportunities, too many things to do, and you need to be able to say, I'm not going to do all of those things because I need to get these 3 things right, and I'm going to focus on them first and not get distracted by all of that.
And you need to understand what your total addressable market is, right? You see very often, I'm entering the cosmetics business, and it's a $40 billion global business. Well, that's great. Where do you sell? Oh, I want to sell through specialty stores. Okay, well, 3/4 of the cosmetics business is at mass market stores. So now, you've lopped the market. It's much smaller, and what types of products are you selling? I mean, if you keep narrowing it down, your total addressable market is really the total number of people that are really candidates for buying your product, and how much money you could generate if you got all of them to buy it. And it's also important to think about what marks your customers. What are the signs that they are right for your product? Here's my business card again. So very often you end up combining these two. We like to make them separate because we think it's so important to understand what their needs are or wants, because it doesn't have to be, it's not always pain, it could be entertainment, right? But to really understand what your customers are looking for, and to understand that objectively, not just because you like it, not just because your friends like it. And why are these things important to them? So topic 5, strategy. So strategy really is the essence of what you're doing, right? This is very similar to your elevator pitch, although it's business focused, right? So it's it's not. This is not a tagline. This is explaining what your business is all about, very simply. It's also one of the few slides that that it makes sense to read rather than just look at a headline. And so we have a little exercise we wanted to run through here. The way we do this is to say kind of what are you going to offer, how is it going to benefit customers, how you make money, and so for Upstart, this is what we would say. So for first-time founders actively launching real businesses, Upstart's an online boot camp that provides results-oriented help just in time remotely. And how you make money is another part of this. Sometimes it's obvious. We're starting a law firm, okay. But with something that's somewhat innovative or new, it's important to explain how you're going to make money. So we sell content like online courses and books and digital tools downloads and services, coaching. And so our little, I don't know how many of you are old enough like me to remember that game Mad Libs, where you kind of fill in the blanks. So this is essentially, Mad Libs' positioning statement. And I spoke to a couple people earlier who said that they were actively working on some businesses. Would someone like to maybe come up here and maybe we get a couple people and just quickly run through their strategy? Anyone? Come on, we won't bite you. All right. Well, all right. Come on up. Come on. Thanks. And please introduce yourself.
Oh, my name is Neil Gronewetter, and my company is 9 Extra Floors. Can I
go for it?
Okay. Okay. So it is for people who are interested in going to socialize, go out on a date with somebody right here, right now, within a 1 mile radius. 9 Extra Floors is the premier proactive location-based social media app that will get you a date in 30 minutes. 9 Extra Floors opens hearts, pants, and doors.
I don't know if anyone's going to be willing to follow that.
Yeah.
Well done. Thank you.
Yes.
Love it. All right, analogs. This is something else that you don't always see in a plan, but we think it's really important. And this may be something that you think about, and it may or may not work into your pitch. But we like it. It's kind of a secret weapon, or not so secret. But so the idea here is, look, almost any company or innovation is built on existing, things, right? So if you understand what's been done before, that's similar to what you're doing in certain ways, like going after like the same business model, or going after the same customers. You can learn things from what's been done before and what's worked and what hasn't worked. The other thing about it is sometimes it makes it very easy. I mean, you see a Hollywood pitch, right? It's Jaws in space. If you take something, if you anchor something with something to something that's familiar, it's much easier for people to grasp what you're doing.
Well, it's also a way to go out and get really good comparables to say, an email newsletter generally acquires customers at this kind of a rate, and it takes them this long to build up their audience, and therefore that's a comparable for my business that could help an investor realize, A, I know what I'm talking about, and B, look, you're on track to achieving that goal, and you know what you need to do next to hit it. So, very valuable. Offerings.
So we talked about minimum viable product. This is where you want to explain it. And a common mistake amongst founders pitching is to spend too much time on this. You want to give a high-level overview of what it is. It could be a diagram, it could be a quick demo, but if your pitch is 20 minutes, you don't want to spend more than about 2 on your product. People are investing in your business, not just your product. Even though that's the thing that you're really excited about, try to have some restraint and give them the high-level view of it.
Right, and it is something, though, and we'll talk more about this later, about sort of your progress of what you've done so far, but it is a very valuable way to say, look, I'm actually doing it. It's here, it exists, you can touch it, feel it, sign up for it. That is extremely valuable benchmark, other than, I have this idea and I think I'm going to do it. So it's something that really builds trust in what you're out there doing it.
Yep, and this is one of the points we'll mention this later on in terms of how you pitch, but this is one of the times during your pitch when you can really switch from building a logical argument to getting people excited. It's the time to step away from the deck, to show them a demo, to get the hair on the back of their neck standing up. The next is marketing. So we talked about that go-to-market strategy. And there's a few components, right? There's the strategy part, and then there's kind of the top tactics that you plan to execute. Business model. Business model is a fancy word for how do you make money. And so there's a couple flavors of this. If you're selling through others, like if you're selling soap to Walmart, you want to concentrate more on unit economics to understand what your break-even volume is, for example, how many units you need to sell to cover your overhead. If you are selling directly to customers, that customer acquisition has to be very efficient, right? You have to know, email newsletter is a great example, that I can buy customers. I can spend $2 to acquire a customer, and that customer is going to be worth $5 or $8 over the lifetime of our relationship with them to advertisers. So getting the relationship between those two numbers is critical. And this is the kind of back of the envelope number that actually is in some ways more valuable, more important than a fancy financial model of 5-year monthly projections. You got to get the basics right. Team. So we have team here in topic 10. If you have a team that's built companies before and made money for investors and is known, that probably is going to be your first slide, right? And we'll talk about pitching, and very often you will explain who you are and how you got to your idea up front. But you can go into more detail either way here on team. And so what you want to explain is who's on your founding team. Very often you want to explain also why are these people qualified for their roles? What are the key roles? Back to the email newsletter, you got three main legs of an email newsletter stool, right? So you have to write great content, you got to sell ads, and you got to market to grow the subscription base. Those are three founders. You know, if you've got those three founders in house and they're qualified because they've done that or similar things before, you can execute.
I've come across a number of clients who are entrepreneurs, and it's their idea, they're the president of the company. They don't really have a team. Now, my understanding is what you say, you really need more than one person to go before anybody you're looking to pitch to show there is a team. It's not just one person. Now, is that true? How many people? What's the sine qua non of people that you need for a team?
We're big fans of having more than one founder, actually. And there's plenty of examples of single founder companies and companies that have been founded by 4 or more people. But if I had to pick, I'd say 2 is the number. It's very, very hard to build a startup. And even just psychologically, having a partner who is, picks you up when you're down, and it happens to us, certainly to me, every day.
One of the things that that I've personally been in this situation before of, we were pre-money, we identified these are the 3 legs of our stool, and we had people that were not yet that were very interested and said, if you get money, if you do this, I will come. So it's sort of like a letter of intent. So what you're proving to your investors is, I know what it takes to build this business. I have the ability to find and attract these people, and I need this to do that. That's also a good way to go. And
if you know that you need that 3rd leg, don't sweep it under the rug and say, we can do it ourselves. Be honest with yourself and with whoever you're pitching to, that you're going to need to find this person, and the further you can get towards identifying.
Do you know them? Give them to me.
Yeah, and know what the profile is of that person. The further you can get towards getting them on board, even if it's just, hey, look, if I get the money, they'll join. Goes a long way.
Is it okay at this point to admit your entrepreneurial failures? Is that a good thing to say, I've done this before, I've learned my lesson, and now I'm changing things up? Or is that something you kind of keep to yourself and hope it doesn't come out?
I think if you explain it that way, then yeah, it's great. I think investors care about, they want to make sure that you're honest, that you're willing to learn, willing to take advice, both and learn from your experiences and from other people, and failing can be a pretty good way to learn. And I have a 2-year-old, so I see how he learns, and he just tries and tries and tries, and he figures it out, and that's a lot like entrepreneurship. So you see a lot of entrepreneurs who have tried it and failed, but you want to fail quickly and recover well and learn from your failures. Risks. So to me personally, I care more about what can go wrong, what's keeping me up at night. What do we think the things are that are most likely to make the business fail, and what can we do to preempt those things, and what can we do to react if those things happen. There's also obviously competition. It depends on the business, but in many cases, if you're doing something innovative, having a competitor, to me, I was on the phone today with a competitor, and I was happy to hear what he was doing, because we're both building something innovative, and I'd much rather have to wrestle with fight someone for market share than to worry that no one's going to buy my product. But investors care, and it's important for you to understand who are the players out there, and don't, you get a lot of entrepreneurs who say, oh, we're different, we have this spin on be honest with yourselves and with investors about who your real direct competitors are, including substitutes, because in many cases it's not just another company doing the same thing. It could be a replacement for the product or service.
And that I've found is a big red flag. Like, it's kind of the rookie mistake if you walk in and say, we don't have any competition, or there's no risk in this business, and right away they're going to check out on you at that point. So it's much better to say, I understand what's risky, here's my plan for addressing it, and this is why I'm qualified to do that.
And investors have more deal flow than you do as an entrepreneur. They see around, they know that there's someone in a garage in Palo Alto who's planning this because they got the plan, and you don't because it's not, they haven't launched it yet. And so, you got to do your homework there. So, the best evidence that, when you're pitching to someone, the big question they're asking all along is, are they going to be able to do this? Can they pull it off? And so this is a very important slide to show not only do we just told you about this great opportunity and our strategy for going after it, and we started getting into our plan for how we're going to execute, but it's not just a story, it's real. We're making it happen. And the more boxes you can check to say, we've got our team, we've got our product built, we've proven that customers will buy our product, we've proven that we can attract customers in a cost-effective, repeatable way. As you move down that, check more of those boxes, you have a more believable story.
What you'll also find is that if you are actually talking to an investor that's pretty serious about you, that's a pretty long conversation. It's not something that you do in the course of 1 week start to finish. And so being able to say, here's the thing I'm doing next, and then the next time you meet, look, I've done that thing. Now here's the next thing I'm doing. It's a way to, again, to build confidence in you that you know what to do, what order, you're actually getting it done. So depending on where you are with your business, these things can be really big goals. They can be even just small goals of, look, I told you I was going to get 100,000 more subscribers to my newsletter this month, and I did it. So.
Investors invest in lines, not dots, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Implementation plan. So this is where an area where you see a lot of plans fall short, where people have not really thought through what are the key things that I need to test. What's the timing around those? How do I measure them? What am I shooting for? And it's not a list of 50 things. It's okay, this quarter or this month we're going to do these. These are the 3 top priorities. We have to get these 3 things done, and a win looks like this. Projections. So what numbers really matter in a plan? We talked a little about the unit economics, and those are critical. And we mentioned break-even volume, so how many units you're going to need to sell to cover your overhead and break even. You also need to know when is that going to happen, because you're going to be bleeding money until then, and so you need to know how much money you need to get there. And you also need to know how you're going to spend your money, and how big could this thing become. And the way you want to do this is 2 ways. You want to do projections from the bottom up. So next month I'll have 2 salespeople, and each can make 100 calls, and they'll close blah blah blah, and it'll roll up to this. And also top down, because you want to make sure that that you're being realistic. So okay, let's look at some other businesses that have done similar things. This comes back to the analogs. How long did it take them to get to X amount of sales? How much, what did they have in terms of resources? How, if at all, did the world change between then and now, to make it easier or harder for us? But you want to have some way to look from the top down as well. Yep.
I've got actually 2 questions. One is on the projections. Everyone always says that the projections are usually bullshit, and they usually are. Should I discount my projections, or is the investor going to discount them for me, and that'll just be a double discount?
Okay, this is one of my pet peeves. Don't say my projections are conservative. Just don't say it. They're not conservative. They're wildly optimistic, and we all know it. I think use your best case. Plan what you think will happen.
I mean, I think what I found when I'm sitting there being grilled is, one, everybody knows your projections are always wrong. They're always wrong, and they're going to change over time. And what is more important is to understand these 3 things are the things that really introduce the variability into this model. and I understand what those 3 things are, and I'm going to pay attention to them. That's way more valuable to know and have a conversation around, this causes it to explode, or this causes my cost to triple. That's what an investor is looking for, that understanding.
And you asked earlier about the detail. This is one of these things where you want to give a high level in your pitch and explain that you thought about it the right way. We built from the bottom up, and we used top-down reality checks, and we did it monthly for 3 or even 5 years. And we have a model, and once if I'm pitching to an investor, and once we get serious, we're happy to share that model with you, and you can play around with the assumptions and tweak it, and we can argue about it and all get smarter about it. Yeah.
I found with investors, a lot of times they look at the financial model just to see, is the entrepreneur rational? Do they, and they like to do math right in front of you and go, wait a second, you're going to have 400 salespeople selling 600 a day, and that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And did you do your homework?
Yeah.
Is it okay to take a salary for yourself when you explain how to spend the money? How sensitive is that?
Yeah.
Their money.
I mean, usually I see people will pay themselves the bare minimum to cover their costs. If you're an investor, you don't want your entrepreneur to hit the wall and not be able to, to give their full time, their full effort, so that they have to be able to pay their bills. But you also don't want them spending, taking all the profit out of the company and paying themselves, an exorbitant amount. They should be making their money when they, from the profit of the company, on exit or.
Yeah, that's another way that you can prove that you've done your homework, is to know what an appropriate salary is for someone who is pre-break even, or and to also be very honest about, hey, here's the minimum it takes for me to be able to commit to this. It's not unreasonable. I've done my thinking. My family's on board with it. This is what it takes. It's
a tough thing also. You see a lot of executives move over to entrepreneurship and say, okay, I made 500 grand at Estee Lauder, and I want to start this cosmetics company, and I'm not going to take a pay cut. Well, good luck selling that to your investors. And then finally, financing. So what's the deal? What are you looking for? How much are you raising now? Where is that going to get you? How you spend it? What's your long-term exit strategy? If you've got some comparables to be able to say, look, if I'm building an email newsletter, look, I can point to 3 companies that had exits, and there's multiples on those exits, and if we hit our numbers, it's reasonable to think that we might be able to be worth this. And there are companies that are acquiring them, and so there are some precedents for turning all of our sweat into cash. Yeah.
I don't see a reference to a discussion of how the investor is going to get his money back, let alone profit.
That's what exit strategy is.
It gets that specific? I mean, not an exit strategy. You're talking about exit strategy for the investor? That sounds like selling the business.
Yeah. So there's a couple ways I mentioned that you turn your illiquid equity, whether it's that you've made it by through sweat because you're a founder or an employee, or you've invested in you own a piece of this company, you got to turn that into cash somehow, right? So you can, if it's a service business, for example, you might dividend. It may not be an acquisition play, or you can sell the company, which is most common, and IPOs, which have been gone for a while, now coming back is another way. And so you want to think about who would buy this thing, how would we most likely make our stock liquid, and also what might that look like? Who would buy us? How much would they buy us for? What were the multiples of and when? And is there a critical mass too? It may be that we have to grow to a certain amount before someone will be interested in us. And what would they be looking for? Someone could buy us for our tech. They could buy us for our growth. They could buy us for our trajectory, our revenue, our expertise, our team.
If I invest $300,000 in your business, I won't see a return until you sell the company? I
That-
wouldn't want to wait that long.
then this may not be a fit for you as an investment. You know, if that's the, and that's one of the things that you want to be on the same page with your investors. Like, hey, look, we think that within 3 to 5 years, we think we can build this to this amount, and we think we can sell it to a company like this. And here's some companies they've bought before, and what they paid for them, and how they valued them. And so if we hit our numbers, we think we could potentially sell to a company like that for this amount of money, and you'd get a return of this.
Just wanted to ask the difference between 14 and 15, like projections and financing. So for projections, you said how much capital is needed, but financing is, you know, how much money you're raising, or projection was how will you spend the money, and financing was, you know, what will you get for the money?
Yeah.
It seems
It's really, very often you're not raising all the money that you're going to need at once. So in financing is, okay, we just told you in projections, this is it's a 5 or 7 year, you know, deal, that it's going to take us a while, but along the way we may have to raise multiple rounds of financing. And so this slide, financing, is about what am I looking for today? Today I'm looking for my seed round. That's going to get me through the next 12 months. Here are the targets that I think I can hit if I get there. And then I think I'm going to need to raise another $3 million for expansion. So this is about, you know, it's a subset of that whole bigger plan.
you know, the valuation, what % is the investor going to get of the company, and what might the IRR be until an exit strategy? Is that in?
This is a matter of style. Personally, I like to not put that in my plan, but you definitely want to think it through. And valuation is a whole other topic that I don't know if we have fully time to get into, but you should have a realistic valuation in mind, and usually there's, you know, or very often there's a negotiation. It depends on who you're pitching to, and there's a whole, that's another, actually, we're giving a webinar on how to finance a startup on next Tuesday. So we'd love to have you join us there.
Almost out of time.
Yeah.
And we haven't gotten to the.
Okay. All right.
Here, skip over this.
All right, pitching. I'll just give a couple quick tips on pitching. So make sure, like I said, getting in front of the right investor is a huge part of this. You know, you get in front of someone who invests in your industry at your stage, and your size of investment that you're looking for, and you have a much better chance. If you don't, then you know, you're probably wasting time for everyone. Understand, you know, in terms of those investors, too, what have they invested in before, and how have those things done? There's something called slide 0 that we talk about. There's stuff that happens on the way down the hall to the conference room. Don't be just talking about the weather. You know, ask some intelligent questions. See if you can ferret out some information. Show that you're listening. That you're asking follow-up questions. You may be able to avoid stepping on a landmine if you get certain information. Oh yeah, we invested in this newsletter, you know, 2 years ago, and it blew up. Well, why did it blow up? Well, maybe you can find something that, you know, you can spin a different way during that time. We talked a little bit about this. You're appealing to both logic and emotion. You don't want your pitch to be just flat and factual. There are times when you want to get people excited, and you know, usually that's after you've laid a foundation of logic. And let your passion show. I judge a business plan competition at Harvard Business School every year, and I watched probably the best pitch of the entire competition, and it was about a kind of daycare facility in China, and the woman didn't convince that there was no mention of kids, there were no pictures of kids. We didn't get the feeling that she really cared about parenting, and you know, the passion didn't come through. And I bet it was there, but you know, it just the way you pitch matters, and you need to let that passion come through. Stories. share your stories, explain how you got to this point. Stories are things, obviously, that people are going to remember, that are going to touch people, and that have impact.
Well, it also explains how you think about things and how you might react in certain situations. About this is why we're doing it, this is what we learned, this is how we work together, because really investors, they're looking for the solid business, but they're investing in the people, and so you need to connect with them on a people level.
Get out of the building and go talk to customers. You need to do this, and you need to show to investors that you've done it, that you're not planning this thing in a vacuum, that you've gotten input from customers all along the way, from when you were planning it to when you were building it, to when you found out what they thought when you put it in front of them. You need to be getting out there in front of customers. Understand, this is back to the analogs, that what's happened before that you can learn from. Is there some sort of secret sauce? Very often there's a finite number of business models out there, and there's usually a couple keys to making them work. Understand those things. Implementation, we talked about. Make sure that you explain the how. You see some plans where people share the vision, but they haven't really thought through how I'm going to get from point A to point B. And you want to make sure that they're sharks with laser beams, right? And they're that they're laser focused on on some very specific goals. We talked about this. Less is more. Don't try to get everything into your plan. You're not going to be able to cover everything. Let them ask questions. Let there be a discussion. Let them want more. And make sure that it's a conversation. Watch their body language. If they're checking their BlackBerry or they're, you can learn a lot by watching what's going on while you're talking. And that's another great thing about having two founders, or at least two people in a pitch, because when you're talking, it's hard to listen and pick up on those cues. And we're running late, and I think this guy's falling asleep, and let's talk about that topic. That seemed to really get him interested, and ask. You can learn a lot from pitching. The people that you're pitching to, if they are in your space, they have seen a lot of things, and they might know a lot of people. You could get introductions, you can get market knowledge. There's a lot you can learn from pitching. I actually often recommend to people, if you're going to go pitch to Steve Brotman in a year to try to raise your Series A round, meet with him today if you can, and find out, what do I need to show you, Steve, when I come back a year from now that will make you invest in a year. Last but not least, and appropriate that we're at 30 Rock, ask for the sale. What do you think? And shut up and listen and see what their reaction is, and don't be afraid to say, are you interested? Yeah.
How long from the day you shake hands for the first time to the day they cut you a check?
It's a great question, and I'll say
a long time.
Yeah. Plan on it. Probably takes at least 6 months. I just had a client spend 9 months raising a Series A round, and she really had all all her ducks in a row. So it often takes that long. And as Jen mentioned, the idea of people investing in lines, not dots, is a big part of that. Because think about it, if you were investing, your incentive is to watch them make progress. And as an investor, you have to flip it around and make some urgency. You have to get this kind of train is pulling out of the station thing going on by getting other investors interested and getting known people, to invest, and soft circling, and showing progress in your business, and reverse that incentive to just sit back and wait.
Is there any qualification of the audience you're presenting to that you should make beforehand to see if person or people you're presenting to really has the authority to say yay or nay? I mean, how do you check that out?
Yeah, you should. you know, a lot of times you'll see people will call themselves angels, and if you ask, like, you know, how many investments have you made? Well, I haven't made one in 3 years. You know, find out what they really do. Your homework. Find out if they really do invest. Do they really invest in your space? Are they really active? And are they smart money? You know, you want your investors to be people who can help you build the business, who can give you great advice and introductions and contacts, and you know, the smarter the investor, the better.
Well, it might be interesting if you said a few words about answering questions and objections, like when to push back and when to show that you can take advice.
Well, take that one, huh? Yeah, you know, I think you want to be strong-willed, but also modest, and it's a chemistry thing too. You know, I think most investors want to feel like this is somebody who I'm going to develop a relationship with over the long term, and I want them to, you know, to impress me and be passionate and walk a fine line between sticking to their guns and what they believe in, but also being, you know, willing to admit when they're wrong and to, you know, to change course when that's necessary.
I think one of the things that I found at least has worked very well for me is you always get hit with a question that you don't know the answer to. And I think that it is totally fair and appropriate to say, you know what, that's a fantastic question. I don't know the answer to it, but I'm going to call you next week and tell you the answer. And it's way better than to try and go, oh yeah, and make something up on the spot, because they smell that blood in the water very quickly. And so, and that's part of that sort of being humble and just, you know, out there about this is what I know, this is what I don't know, and that's something I need to know, so I'm going to go find it out.
Yeah.
I have a question about different pitches between seed money, angel, and VC. So if you're just looking for a small amount of seed money, the same format apply?
Yeah, I think as you pitch to more and more sophisticated investors, right? So you pitch to your, you know, to your wealthy uncle. They're investing in you because they know you, they love you, they trust you. As you pitch to people that don't know you, you have more to prove. And the more sophisticated the investor, as you move up, you know, towards a private equity or venture capital firm, you know, their process is probably more thorough. They have more deal flow. They're probably going to spend more time on due diligence and really drill down and you know, have their experts talk to you and go through your numbers and talk to your competitors, and so you tend to have to be more buttoned up as you move through that process.
And what I'd say is, I mean, the general format, these questions, you should be getting them from any sophisticated investor, whether they're doing a seed round or, you know, your C round. I think that one of the key trends that's happening out there is for some businesses, it takes less money to get them started. And so what you're seeing is angels are actually doing deals that 5 years ago VCs would have done. And so they're starting to use all the same criteria and filters and checklists about, is this a good idea or isn't it? So, I mean, I'd recommend using the same format. How in-depth you have to go, how many backup materials, how long it's going to take, that might vary based on the amount of money you're raising.
We have time for one more question.
Yes, can you just touch upon the amount of time that you're going to have to separate yourself from the business to be out fundraising, and it's probably twice and 3 times what you think you're going to have to do?
It's brutal.
It's your day job and your night job.
It's brutal. It's very, very hard to raise capital, and that's why if you don't need it, like rule number 1 is make sure that you really need the money and that there's no other way to get it or to accomplish your goals. You know, that's why we recommend bring on co-founders who can build your minimum viable product if it's possible, and then you won't have to go raise money to build the product. You know, if there's a way to avoid it, do it. But because it does detract your focus from building your company. And
well, it is a good reason to have co-founders too, is that if one founder, usually the CEO, is very focused externally and trying to get the financing, and the rest of the team is at home building the company and make sure that you're making traction as you go. It's hard to wear both those hats at the same time.
Great. Well, thank you very much.